Happy to welcome producer, actor, writer, and if you were a fan of the 90s Nickelodeon like I was growing up, you recognize him as the host of Nick Arcade, Mr. Phil Moore. Phil, how are you, sir?
Hey man, it's great to be here. I am doing great. How are you today, man? I love the intro, by the way. You checked out. You make it sound like I should be a responsible citizen by now.
I do my best. I do my best to try.
but I'm, but you did a great job, man. I'm great. How you doing?
Good, good. No, and I've been excited to chat with you, for weeks ever since we set up this conversation because
Uh-huh.
I'm in my late 30s, so I was like the
Uh-huh.
prime age for the what I call the golden age of Nickelodeon.
Right,
And
right.
I'm excited to talk about, Nick Arcade here in a second, but I did want to
Mhm.
ask you like how did you start your career in show business? Was it something that you aspired to do at an early age, or was it something that you just kind of happened into?
Absolutely not. Something I just happened into, which is why it's funny because when I talk to like people that are my age that have kids that are like in their 20s and 30s, and they're like, he doesn't know what he wants to do. And I'm like, that's okay. If he's heading in the right direction, if it looks like it's something that can work out, be supportive until you see it's something really going off the rails. Because I'm telling you, man, it wasn't even something I kind of a little bit did. It wasn't like, oh, I used to do theater or I used to, do none of that. As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, growing up in Baltimore, my best friend back home is now a major composer. I mean, he's one. I actually have a friend who's like family to me that I can actually say has conducted an orchestra at Carnegie Hall. He's played Carnegie Hall. Okay, so it was in his blood. Me and his sister is a teacher at Berkeley Conservatory, a music teacher there. And so to keep us out of trouble during the summer, our moms would go, "Let's send the kids to theater camp," and I'd be like, "Really? Can I go to the other camp where it smells like a locker room and you're out in the middle of a lake somewhere and you're wearing the same underwear for 4 days? Can I go to that camp? Can I go to Camp Anawana? No, I've got to go to theater camp. Black kid in the middle of Baltimore City singing Oklahoma. It literally, I literally was the opening scene to the reboot version of oh my gosh, what's the Zack Snyder did it. It has Night Owl in it. Mr.
Oh,
Manhattan.
Watchmen.
Watch me right. I am literally the reboot opening scene when to Night Owl. If anybody saw the reboot on HBO, it starts out in a black town doing Oklahoma, and I was like, "Who's been talking to my mom?"
I'm
And
never
here's
gonna
the
watch that scene the same way again now.
And listen, here's the thing that's crazy. I am not kidding. For those of you who think I'm sitting up here trying to say something here, just trying to be funny. While the scene was playing on TV, and I got over the initial shock of the scene opens up with a bunch of a black community doing Oklahoma. After I go over the initial shock, I'm sitting on this couch going, everything's up to date in Kansas City. It's gone about as far as say, oh man,
It was like you were on autopilot. It just clicked.
oh my gosh. It's so real, man. But no, it was never anything I aspired to do at all, man. All my friends, they were all grown ups. Everybody thought I was going to be like a scientist. I was heavily into aviation. I was heavily into the space program. If it had anything to do with astronomy, I was all over that. As a matter of fact, when I ended up like going to college down in Florida, I went to an aviation university. I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. It was all about if it was up in the sky. I didn't necessarily want to be a pilot. Didn't necessarily want to be an astronaut, but I was fascinated with the space and with cosmos and with aviation. Why things went up, why things stayed up, and different ways to bring them back safely. My big thing was I wanted to be the guy to invent. In my brain, I thought I wanted to be the guy who eventually invented controlled reentry, so you had no need for a heat shield. That's why, like when you watch Martin, like when any show you watch, whether it's Star Wars, whatever, you don't need a heat shield because the only thing that causes the heat is the accelerated descent and burning on the bottom of your ship when you are re-entering the atmosphere. But if you can control your descent, you don't need anyway. I think I'm nerding out on you here, but that's what I
No,
thought
I
I was
love
going to
it. No,
do.
I love this kind of stuff.
But that's what I thought I was going to do. The thing that got me into show business, honestly, I've always been sort of like the odd sort of personality. I always like to have fun. I'd always like to goof off and have fun and be funny with friends all the time. And I was working at AT&T after school, after college, and had a respectable job. I was making the parents proud, and AT&T went on strike one year, and we were out on the picket line, and I was just out there, just being myself, having fun, and some of the other people who I worked with at the time were equally like crazy funny people, and it was just like you would have thought we were at somebody's backyard barbecue. We were having so much fun, but in reality, we were all broke, busted, and unemployed, but we were having so much fun. And somebody said, "Man, you having too much fun to be out here broke, man. You know what? Since you got this time in your hand, you should try doing open mic night at this brand new comedy club that opened up." And those words being said to me is what made me go, I got number time. Okay, why not? I'll give it a shot. So then I started writing down some of the things that we were doing that I thought were funny. Because most of the time people, you're hanging with your friends and people are just shooting the breeze, and you just chatting about, and you're just going off, and you're saying stuff and the whole room's laughs, and then tomorrow morning you don't remember what you talked about. So it was weird. I started like I became a stenographer at our little gatherings. We get together and we laugh and go, ha ha ha. Hold on a second. Wait, what was that again, Bob? Started writing things down, and just put together, open mic night. You need 2-3 minutes. That's all you needed. 2-3 minutes, by the way, folks, in an open mic night is an eternity on stage, But that's literally how it started. That we're talking about. I'm well out of high school. I'm well out of college. I'm a grown man. Was a man. I think I was like, at the time I was married. It was like I was an adult, man. I was adulting, as they say, And that was the first time I ever did any show busy thing outside of being thrown into the summer musical theater thing. When I was a kid back in Baltimore. That's it.
Did you have any like stage fright or stage anxiety when you did the open mic nights?
No. Okay. And that's why I think it a lot of things sort of, there is this thing, no matter what it is you do. Like I'll say sometimes I look at somebody and all they are is the person giving a presentation at IBM. And in my brain, I go, they'd be a great show host, or they would be fantastic at the Emmys. It's not about the thing you do, it's the skill set. Certain skills are required to do different things, and a lot of times it can be 4 or 5 different things, but the same skill is required to do whatever. I was that guy when I was like in elementary school. Dude, you remember back in like when you were in middle school and you had to give oral reports and everybody's cringing in the back, nobody wants to be first. I would be like, Miss Smith, it's the day to day for the oral report. I'd like to be first if it is. Like, it's like getting up in front of people and rambling on has never been anything I've shied away from. So no, yeah, it's the first time, but yeah, it was never any. The stage fright, I would say, came from when you do stand-up comedy. There's an expectation. If you're just giving a report, people just have to listen. If you're even at times like little youth things at church, and Phil's gonna read the whatever today. I'm like, great. All they have to do is listen. The only thing that was a little bit different when I started doing stand-up was there is an expectation. It is a give and a receive. If I say the thing right, then I expect to receive some laughter back. And when it doesn't happen, that's when you kind of go, ooh. But it wasn't about being afraid to go up on stage. It was anxiety over not getting the expected response that you intend when you go up, doing stand-up.
Right.
The reverse is, I always say it's the reverse for singers. Like when you do stand-up, you say something, you want to hear noise. If you're a singer, you want them to shut up while you're singing. If they start gabbing while you're talking, that means you're not holding them, So that was but no, any real stage fright? Not really, no.
Well, and from there, how did you get the job with Nick Arcade? Because it started
Oh,
in the early '90s.
yeah.
So how did you get involved with that show?
It literally, I always tell people this is the most boring part of the history of film noir. It was just an audition. I mean, that's literally what it is. I had an agent, and my agent, started sending me out for a variety of things. At the time, I was living in Orlando, Florida, and during that time, like toward the late 80s, like 88, 89, 90, Orlando started becoming what they called Hollywood East. At the Universal was building not only the theme park, but they were building actual working sound stages, just like at the Hollywood one. And the Disney World had been there, but they started building the Disney MGM Studios, which is now, I think it's called Hollywood Disney or something. But at the time, they called it the Disney MGM Studios, and it was going to have also actual, real, active working sound stages like the Disney Studios here in Los Angeles. So they were trying to become like that East Coast version, take a little bit of the thunder maybe from New York. Atlanta hadn't gotten into the game yet. And that's what they were in the process of doing. So again, it was a kind of right place, right time. I came there, I was in the right place at the right time. And that's what they were trying to gear into doing when I decided to make this sort of career change or dip my toe into this new career venture.
And what's interesting, for those that you're listening that grew up around that time, there were a lot of game shows on Nickelodeon. Like you had Nick Arcade, you had like Guts, Legends of the Hidden Temple. So you had a ton of different options. With me being, an only child, I had video games as a big outlet for me. So when I so happened to, watch this show about, kids playing video games, I'm like, oh, like that could be me. And
Yeah.
and then, as an adult, I appreciate more the behind the scenes aspect, because it's insane how you guys made that show happen. It
Yeah.
really, like, as a kid, you're not thinking about it because you're like, oh, I get to be in a video game. That's cool. And when you see
Yeah.
how you guys pulled it off, I'm like, what?
I always give mad props to everybody other than myself because, first of all, I did the audition. It took like the initial audition and 6 callbacks, like 7 tries
6?
before yes. And I just tell you, most of the time, for those who don't know, most of the time, folks, you do the audition, then you get a callback. And then when you do the callback, it's almost like the initial audition, except you're doing it and you're competing against fewer people. They've narrowed down the field of folks. And then by the time you get to maybe callback number 3 or 4 tops, you're now doing it in front of the executives, the producers. If there's a show, like if you're an actor, you might be reading with the actual star of the show, and then they make their decision. This was like 6 additional times after the original audition. And at the time, even though you named all of those game shows, at the time there wasn't a lot of game shows on. Double Dare was on. The Get the Picture had been on. The first show that Mike O'Malley hosted. There was another show. It's weird. Like I didn't watch Nickelodeon at the time, before I started, hosting there. But there was another show, a couple other shows on, and I can't remember what their names are. But there were 2 other shows prior to the year 1990. And I just remember once I found out what I was auditioning for, I said, let me look at what's on. Wild and Crazy Kids was on. But it was like, let me find out what's on so I have a familiarity with this network that I'm auditioning for something to do. It was interesting. It did become a thing, which is why I think to this day, the 90s is considered the golden era, because there was only a couple of game shows, 2 or 3 on prior. And then once you got into the 2000s, not really so much, but like the day in which that's what people wanted, that's what people were throwing down on. That was the decade of the 90s. And I literally did an entire decade there. I mean, we started shooting Nick Arcade in 1990. It premiered January 1st, 1991. Despite what the internet may tell you, people, when people always go, but it says right here. I'm like, I know it says it right there, but I was there. So like, I'm not going to argue with you. I was there. And so, and then the last thing I did was I did a show in 1999 called You're On. It was like a hidden camera game show, and then I was on for a little teeny bit as a consultant on Double Dare 2000. So, and in between, I did a whole bunch of other stuff. Did 27 episodes of Figure It Out. I did the pilot of all that. There was the Nickelodeon Live Tour, which was a touring show that went to all of the arenas. You know, wherever you play, wherever your basketball team played, we would go and do this show. It was the sister touring show to the Double Dare live show. And if anybody's ever seen that or been that, we're talking, 25,000, screaming kids in this place. And we're just like packed up on Red Bull going, wow, it was so much fun. But yeah, I did the full decade, 1992 to the year 2000. And it was an amazing time. And that's when the game shows that when I got there, Get the Picture had just finished. Double Dare was into, I think, its second incarnation. Then Nick Arcade came along. Then after Nick Arcade came Legends of the Hidden Temple. Then Guts. No, then was it Guts? I can't remember if Guts or Figure It Out, but it was like neck and neck when those two started. And then we became like from till the end of the decade, we were the Fab Five, those five shows, and it was a great time. Like I got to know all the hosts. We got to hang out, doing things like Nick Takes Over Your Schools and the big helpathons. And it sounds cliche, man, but it really was a family community. And now people like you, I have a whole new family because at the time there were a whole bunch of kids on Nickelodeon, kids that were on Clarissa Explains It All, kids that were on all that. Well, they were kids. I was friends with their parents. And, I was friendly to them, but they were kids. So it was kind of like you see them, you hang out, you do whatever show you were doing, and you sit in the green room and talk with their parents and all that stuff. But now they're all in their 30s and 40s, and I get to hang out with them because now we're all grown up. So it's like, oh my gosh, these little kids are now, adults, and we're all sitting around talking about, oh man, let me tell you about my kids. You got kids? That kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And mentioning the popularity of the game shows around that time, and I think as great as the cartoons were around that time, people like to feel involved, like they like that engagement. And I think that's one of the reasons why the game shows were such a big hit, because I can remember watching them and being like, that could be me on the stage, or it could be me playing this video game, or climbing the aggro crag, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So it provided, a lot of entertainment for not just me, but, for other kids that I knew. Like we'd go to school and we would talk about, oh, did you watch Nick Arcade? And usually I'd be like, I could have probably beat that game faster than the contestant could. So I've got to ask, so you mentioning the audition and the 6 callbacks that you had, which I get, but 6 I think is a little extreme. Like that's a lot.
It was. Yeah.
But when you went into the audition, did you have, because you were known for being like a very high energy kind of host, like always upbeat and really making the kids who are the contestants feel comfortable and almost at home on the set. Did you have that kind of style when you did the initial audition, or did that?
Yeah.
So then you kind of developed as you were doing.
No, I walked in and that was just me. The thing about all of the shows, and this is me, I'm gonna pat the back of all the creators of all the shows, and also pat the back of all the hosts of all the shows, because the thing that I realized that was common is all of the shows were different. Like they all were different, and what they all did was, in creating these game shows, whoever created these shows, whatever the individual, it's like they really were interested in what kids like to do, and then said, how can we do that in an extreme way? Kids like playing video games. Look, I wasn't the first and only video game show on TV, but it's the one that people will remember the most because we did something sort of extreme with it. Figure It Out is just a trivia game show. Okay. But what if you had some extreme stakes in getting the answer wrong? Kids like sports. You like playing basketball? Let's put a bungee cord to your back. You know what I mean? It's like, let's just do everything in an extreme way. You like having family game night? well, what if instead of just hitting the pop-o-matic and getting your get out of jail free card, what if you had to dig your finger up a nose and pull out some boogers and snot? It's like family game night, everybody does, but Nickelodeon went, how do we do these things extreme? Even like with Legends of the Hidden Temple, it was like, kids sat around, we told stories, we make up, stories and things. Well, it was like, what if though we did it and like instead of it being like, and a guy turned around and jumped at me, there's a real temple guard doing it. So it was something really, really unique about like how they approached just even doing these shows, so that it was just regular but like amped up. Now for me, I had been doing stand-up, stand-up comedy, but then I sort of got away from being on the road because I had become a brand new dad. And part of doing stand-up is you have to go on the road a lot. Well, I didn't want to be away. I had a newborn at home. I wanted to be there to support at the time my wife, and I wanted to, be a hands-on dad. And again, right time, right place. With these new sound stages shooting real TV shows there, they needed audience warm-up people. And for anybody who's ever been to a taping of a TV show, there's a person that's there that keeps the audience pumped, that keeps the audience hyped. Their job is to be the hype person for the show and to make everybody feel welcome and at home. And it was already in my DNA because I've been doing that as an audience warm-up for a variety of different shows. I was the audience warm-up for the new Mickey Mouse Club. I was the audience warm-up for, Let's Make a Deal before it became the Wayne Brady version. I was the audience warm-up for the $100,000 episodes of America's Funniest Home Videos, because they would shoot some of them I was the audience warm-up for Win, Lose, or Draw and Teen Win, Lose, or Draw, which was like a game show where like Pictionary, but at the time they called it, Win, Lose, or Draw. So I was, and again, we'd have these studio audiences. And so my job was to make sure that everybody felt welcome, kept everybody pumped up. Because, when you watch a TV show on television, it might be 30 minutes in TV time. But in real life in the studio, it could be an hour and a half. And so you want to make sure that everybody still is on the edge of their seats. And whenever you came back from whatever commercial break or came back from whatever technical hold there was for whatever malfunction, the audience was still like, no, we're still there. We're still good. Let's do it. Let's go. And that was what I did, and look, as you can tell, just even talking right here, I still have this crazy energy. I can't even imagine what I was like 30 years ago if I'm still like this now. So it was in my DNA naturally. The one thing that I noticed when I began hosting this show, and well, before I got hosted the show, the final audition was more like a screen test where they brought you into the studio. We used the actual set to get the picture instead of Nick Arcade because they were still building the Nick Arcade set on a different soundstage. And they brought in real kids. They paid them, their parents would bring them in. They'd audition and pick some kids to be our test contestants. And they narrowed it down to 2 people. And so this is years later. I asked the creators of the show, James Bethea and Karim Metcalf. This is like maybe 5 years ago. We're in New York City. We're hanging out. We're having pizza. And I'm like, guys, now that I'm producer, I get to see a lot of people and their criteria that I base how I choose who's on various shows. I'm like, why did you guys choose me? Was I just the most awesome dude of all? And then without even hesitating, no. Like, pin in my ego balloon, pop. So I'm like, then I'm very humbly like, why'd you pick me? And I think this is a roundabout way of answering your initial question. They said the other guy was fantastic, and I never asked who he was. I didn't want to know who he was. I'm like, but they said the other guy was fantastic. I mean, we got down. Phil with 7 auditions. It took so long because and it got down to unison. So the other guy went in first. I wasn't there, and then they brought me in the next day. And he said, but he was fantastic. He was like, he had everything. He had like the boom, 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 boom. And I said, then why did you choose me? And they go, because even when you're doing an audition, when you're doing a screen test, sometimes they stop to change the batteries on the camera. Sometimes they stop because they want to discuss something, and they go, okay, could you back up and do it again, pick it up from this spot, whatever. For whatever reason, whenever they would stop, they said the other person would look over his cards, make sure he was having everything. You could see him kind of memorizing stuff and getting it in his head. And I'm like, okay. He goes, yeah, but whenever you stop, you would put down your cards and you would go and talk to the kids. And they said, we saw this real, authentic desire to make the kids, even though these are our test audition, helping me audition kids, he said, we saw that you naturally wanted to engage them and make them feel comfortable. Because if I said the line wrong, I said the line wrong. Instead of sitting there going, make sure I get this line right, make sure I get this line right. He said, we saw that your memorization did not overshadow your desire to make the kids who were there with you feel comfortable. He said, that was from your last audition. We went, boom. Every time we stopped, I talked to the kids. So it was kind of weird. The thing that got me a job was nothing that ever got recorded. You're busy video, they're recording you so they can look at it and, go back to New York and sit around in the office and decide but whenever they stop the cameras to change tape or change a battery, that stuff is what made the difference for them.
And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about the purpose of the shows, to really like make the kids feel involved and feel comfortable. So you doing it off camera, yeah, that's really observant on their part. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, once they told me that, again, now that I'm producer, I added that to my repertoire of things to look out for when I'm out now working. I was like, it was really good insight to find that out about them. I never knew that until like about 5 years ago.
Well, that was a great thing that you would do. Like at the beginning of Nick Arcade, you would ask each kid like about their hobbies or like a sport they might play. Like you get to know the contestant a little bit. And I bet that had to make them, feel even better than the fact that they were on an actual game show.
Yeah, it does. It's a way to sort of just loosen them up. Like we start out playing the game right away with the face-off. But by the time we got done, before we go on any further, just who you are and then get the audience to cheer for you. It's kind of neat to say, I collect baseball cards, and 400 kids in the audience go, yay, baseball cards. And again, you feel really good about yourself. Like no matter what your hobby was, we were going to shine a spotlight on it and really just celebrate whatever it is you did and make you feel good about it. Nobody ever came on and said, I collect comic books, and people were like, comic books, what a nerd. Now, nobody ever did that. Nobody, if you said you were on a football team, we went, yay. If you said like, hey, I sing in the choir, I'm the lead singer, and we went, yay. But if you said, I have a stamp collection, we would go, yay. You would feel good about whatever it was you did as a person, not just a kid, but as a human being.
Yeah, absolutely. As we start to wrap up here, I did want to ask you, through all the numerous episodes you did of Nick Arcade, do you have a particular like favorite memory or moment that still stands out to you to this day?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my favorite moments is when we had the cast of Salute Your Shorts on. Because, and I don't know about any other, because we had the cast of Welcome Freshmen on. We had the cast of Clarissa Explains It All on. But the reason why I think I had so much fun with the cast of Salute Your Shorts is they were really fans of the show. You know what I mean? Like as a grown-up, I watched a handful of Clarissas, and maybe Clarissa watched Nick Arcade, or maybe the people that played her mom and dad watched Nick Arcade an episode or two. But when we had the cast of Salute Your Shorts on, they were like, they knew the games. They were asking about previous episodes. They were asking me about other contestants. And so they were so involved with their knowledge of the show that normally I'm the one throwing out the energy so that people can feed off of it. But they threw back so much energy at me that I was feeding off of them. And I just had a good time because it was one of those things where it was like I didn't have to work as hard because they were just throwing this like really cool energy toward me. Just because another thing, they weren't nervous. A lot of kids were naturally, the reason why you stopped and said, man, I could do so much better than them is because most of these contestants had never been, like you asked me, did I ever have stage fright getting up in front of people? For a lot of the contestants on Nick Arcade, it's their first time being in front of people doing a thing. But when you had these actors, well, that's what they do. They get up and they perform, and so the crowd didn't make them nervous. The situation that they were in playing a game didn't make them nervous. As a matter of fact, it made them turn up their competitiveness up high, and so that one has like a really special sort of memory for me because I just remember, wow, I'm really having a little bit of extra fun than normal,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I remember when that happened, like the crossover episode, like we had the cast of a certain show on Nick Arcade. And I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
There is one particular moment that I want to ask you about.
Okay.
So the announcer for Nick Arcade would always have these, clever intros for you. Like I remember
Andrea Lively.
Yeah, where there was one where she said the only person to ever beat Sonic the Hedgehog in a 100-yard dash. Like I loved stuff like that. There was one where she said, "No, he's not the guy from Star Trek." And you come out wearing the Geordie LaForge visor. And I went back and watched that episode and I like fell out of my seat laughing.
Look,
how'd you pull that off?
Okay, so if anybody goes on my Instagram, it's Fillmore for you. It's Fillmore, the number 4 and the letter U. I actually have that pinned on my Instagram. I was making an appearance at a big arcade, and somebody asked me about that, and they put together a little video of that moment that you're talking about. But so here's what happened. So when I was hosting Nick Arcade, every now and again, somebody would think that I was LeVar Burton from Reading Rainbow. I would go places and they'd be like, "I love Nick Arcade. Yeah, I like Reading Rainbow too." And I'm like, "Great, I like it too, but I'm not him." But you know what I mean? One world, you know what I mean? We're all doing the same thing. Then later on, when you got some older kids, you had kids on Nick Arcade who were 14, 15. He goes, "Dude, how do you see with that visor on?" I'm like, again, I'm not him, but hey, so it happened so much, and I had fun with it. Don't get me wrong, and it was first of all to be even my name being spoken in the same sentence favorably with LeVar Burton, with all of the phenomenal accomplishments he's had, was just an honor. So one day it had happened again, and so after on one day we were shooting. So I went to the executives, I went to the art department, and I said, guys, it happened just today. And I'm like, yeah, we thought it was funny. Somebody in the audience, when you were, before we started taping, I love this show. Thank you. I like Reading Rainbow too. And I'm like, and I was mic'd, and the people in the control room, they all heard. So I said, hey, can I come out? Like, can we make a visor? And so I wrote that line, the line that Andrea says, I wrote it. The little Star Trek emblem pin, I already had one because, nerd. And so I just had the art department make a visor for me. And I showed the producer the intro that I wrote, and they said they loved it. I gave it to Andrea, and the rest, as they say, is what you see.
I just love that, like you come out, you're wearing the visor and you just like are pointing at the camera and really like playing up the whole thing was just, oh, it was so good. So good. The fact that you owned it was so good.
Oh man, I'm telling you, it was so much fun. And like I said, it would always come after, like, it was really interesting that they always acknowledged like Nick Arcade first and then a LeVar Burton thing. Like I never had the situation to go, hey, aren't you the Reading Rainbow guy? It would be like, hey, you're the Nickelodeon guy. Yeah. Oh, and I like Reading Rainbow, or I like Star Trek too. And I'm like,
but at least they mentioned Nick Arcade first.
Exactly. So. And like I said, I embraced it. I had fun with it, and ended up like doing that little bit on the show. And like I said, 2 years ago, I was at an arcade doing an appearance and told that story. Somebody cut it together with footage of LeVar Burton and footage from that intro, and I have it pinned on my Instagram page because it's classic. It represents for me what I think is best of the 90s.
I'll have to go check that out when we're done. Last thing before we get out of here, do you have a website or social media you'd like to plug? And do you have any? I know you've done some Comic-Con conventions in the past. Do
Right,
you have any coming up
right.
that you want to talk about?
Yes. As a matter of fact, November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, I'm going to be in Atlantic City, New Jersey at J1 Gaming Expo. It's going to be at the Showboat Hotel. So it's like 3 nights, 3 days, whatever. It's going to be cosplaying, anime, lots of gaming. And I'm going to be there. I think I'm going to be emceeing a cosplay contest. I think I'm going to be emceeing a video game tournament. So if you're in the area of Atlantic City, this November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, J1 Gaming Expo. Check it out because I'm going to be there. And then my social, I already told you, my Instagram is and my TikTok or my X is my name, simply my name, Phil, Phil Moore, More, the number 4 and the letter U. Sort of a Prince thing, like I would die for you. The number 4 and the letter U on both of those. And I also have a fan page on Facebook if anybody still uses Facebook. My fan page, you can tell it's me because I actually did, Seth Green reached out to me and I did 2 episodes of Robot Chicken where they made a little Phil Moore Nick Arcade doll and I voiced myself. And so it's the right page because it's actually that little picture of my Robot Chicken doll on it. And then other than that, I am a producer. I right now on Monday nights, it just premiered 2 weeks ago. There's a brand new Latin-inspired game show called Loteria Loca, hosted by Jaime Camil from Jane the Virgin and Coco. And our musical band director is the legendary Sheila E. It comes on Monday nights at 9 o'clock. And we just finished shooting the shows and they just began airing. So if people want to check that out, I'm now like behind the scenes, still getting my game show on.
Fantastic. Phil, this has been an honor. I appreciate you so much for taking the time to chat with me.
Oh man, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm glad you reached out, and I'm glad you were persistent because sometimes I do get a little busy, but you kept on your game, man, and here we are. So it's been my absolute pleasure, man. You do a great job. This has been a lot of fun.